The message came on a Tuesday morning, though Commander would later think it strange that he remembered such a small detail about the day that changed everything. Earth's deep space monitoring stations had detected the signal first, a transmission unlike anything humanity had ever received. It was sophisticated, multi-layered, and most importantly, it was meant for them. Stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense platform, watching the translated message play for the fifth time. The holographic display showed a creature that looked like it had stepped out of a nightmare, tall, covered in thick armor plates, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed with an amber light. Yet its voice, translated by the ship's computers, was calm and formal. "People of Earth," the alien said, "I am War Master of the Galactic Council. We come in desperation, seeking warriors to aid us in our greatest crisis." Ambassador stood beside, her arms crossed. She had been Earth's choice to handle first contact protocols, a woman known for her sharp mind and steady nerves. "Play it again," she said quietly. The message continued. Explained that 47 different alien species had formed the Galactic Council over 10,000 years ago. They had rules for everything: trade, diplomacy, and most importantly, warfare. For centuries, these rules had kept the galaxy in relative peace. Wars were fought with honor. Battles were scheduled. Conflicts had boundaries that all civilized species respected. Then came the Ravagers. The Ravagers were a hive-mind species, explained. They did not negotiate. They did not follow the ancient rules of warfare. They attacked without warning, fought without honor, and consumed entire worlds. The Council had been fighting them for 12 years and losing ground every month. "We have reviewed your species' history," said, and something in his tone made his jaw tighten. "Your methods are primitive, chaotic. You fight like animals without discipline or honor, but perhaps that is what we need now." The message ended with coordinates and a request. The Council wanted Earth to send military forces to join the fight as auxiliary troops. They would provide technology, resources, and transportation. In return, humanity would fight on the front lines. Turn 2, what do you think? Ran a hand through his dark hair. He had spent 20 years in Earth's unified military, rising through the ranks during the resource wars and the Pacific conflicts. He knew war. He knew its costs. "I think they're desperate," he said, "and I think they're looking down on us." "They are," agreed, "but that might work in our favor." 3 weeks later, found himself aboard a transport ship heading toward the edge of known space. Earth had sent its best, 5,000 soldiers, 200 fighter pilots, and support staff. Captain commanded the fighter squadrons, a woman with ice in her veins and reflexes that bordered on supernatural. Lieutenant Minu served as tactical officer, young but brilliant at reading patterns. The journey took 17 days through something the aliens called fold space. When they emerged, got his first look at the war. The Council's fleet stretched across the void like a city made of metal and light. Ships of every size and shape floated in precise formations. Everything was organized, neat, and orderly. It looked more like a parade than a war zone. Met them in person aboard the flagship. He towered over the humans, his armored body making grinding sounds as he moved. Behind him stood several other alien officers, each from different species. They all watched the humans with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed disgust. "Welcome," said, though his tone suggested the opposite. "I hope you understand the honor of fighting alongside the Council." Kept his face neutral. "We're here to help end this war." "Indeed," gestured to a holographic star map. "Let me explain how warfare is properly conducted. Battles begin at dawn local time to the contested planet. They end at dusk. On the 7th day, both sides observe a rest period for the wounded and for honoring the dead. Ships engage in formation, at distances that allow for proper maneuvering. Ground forces meet in designated combat zones, away from civilian populations." Captain, standing beside, made a small sound, shot her a warning glance. Commanders declare their intentions before major offensives, continued. This allows the defending force to prepare appropriately. Victory is determined by strategic position, casualties inflicted, and objectives secured. When one side has clearly lost, they surrender with honor, and the victor treats prisoners according to the codes of war. Minyu was typing rapidly on his data pad, but his hands had started shaking. Knew what the young officer was thinking because he was thinking the same thing. This wasn't warfare, this was theater. And the Ravagers asked carefully, do they follow these rules? Amber eyes darkened. They do not. They attack at night. They target civilians. They use deception and trickery. They refuse to honor surrenders or respect the sanctity of rest days. They are animals. I see, said. What he wanted to say was that the Ravagers had figured out how to win, but he held his tongue. Over the next 3 days, attended briefing after briefing. He learned about the Council's military doctrine, their technology, and their long history of honorable warfare. He learned that in 10,000 years following these rules, the Council had never lost a war. Until now. The Ravagers were winning because they fought to win, not to follow rules. They struck at supply lines during rest periods. They ambushed fleets in fold space. They used captured Council ships as bombs. Every tactic that made them effective was considered dishonorable by Council standards. On the 4th day, Ambassador finished negotiating Earth's contract with the High Chancellor, the nominal leader of the Council. The terms were simple. Humanity would provide military support for a period of 3 years. In return, Earth would receive advanced technology, trade agreements, and a seat at the Council table. That night gathered his senior officers in a secure room on the human transport ship. Captain spoke first. They're going to lose this war. Yes, agreed. They fight like it's a game, Minyu added. Like both sides agreed to the rules before starting. That's exactly what it is to them, said. He pulled up the star maps showing current Ravager territory. For 10,000 years, everyone played by the same rules. Warfare was predictable, controllable, almost civilized. Then someone came along who didn't care about the rules. Sergeant, a combat veteran who had served in 3 different Earth conflicts, leaned back in her chair. So what do we do? Looked at each of them. These were Earth's finest warriors, people who had survived wars where the only rule was survival. We teach them, he said quietly. But first, we show them what real war looks like. They're not going to like it, warned. No, agreed, they're not. The next morning, assigned the human forces to Sector 7, a supposedly minor defensive position along the outer edge of Council territory. It was clear he expected them to fail. It was also clear he didn't consider them important enough to risk in a major battle. As the human ships moved into position, stood on the bridge of their command vessel, watching the alien fleet maintain its perfect formations. Somewhere out in the dark, the Ravagers were coming. And when they arrived, they were going to learn that humanity had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of survival. Because on Earth, war had never been about honor. It had always been about winning. Sector 7 was exactly what expected, a backwater position that nobody thought mattered. The human fleet settled into orbit around a barren moon, establishing defensive positions according to the charts had provided. The nearest Council fleet was 6 hours away at maximum fold speed. They were, essentially, alone. It's an insult, Captain said, staring at the tactical display on the bridge. They put us here hopping, we'll embarrass ourselves quietly. Lieutenant Minyu was already running simulations. The sector hasn't seen action in 8 months. Last Ravager probe was detected 11 months ago. According to Council intelligence, this area is low priority for both sides. Nodded slowly, which makes it perfect. Turned to look at him. Perfect for what? For the Ravagers to hit when no one expects it. Pulled up the larger strategic map. Look at the pattern. Every council position has a schedule. Battles happen during certain hours. Defenses rotate on predictable cycles. If you were the Ravagers, where would you strike? Anywhere the council thinks is safe, said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Exactly. Opened a comm channel to all human ships. All units, this is command. Disregard council defensive protocols. I want full sensor sweeps every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day. Fighter patrols on rotating schedules, no patterns. Ground forces start setting up defensive positions around the base, but not where the council maps suggest. Use natural terrain. Dig in. Down on the moon's surface, Sargent organized her ground troops with the efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times. The council had provided them with prefabricated defensive structures designed to be set up in neat, visible lines. Ignored them entirely. I want trenches here, here, and here, she said, pointing to positions that used the natural for cover. Overlapping fields of fire, fallback positions every 200 meters, and I want mines, lots of mines, in approaches the council manual says are non-combat zones. Her second-in-command, a corporal named, hesitated. Sergeant, the council protocols say mines are only allowed in declared defensive perimeters. The council is losing, said flatly. We're not going to lose with them, set the mines. Sub-Commander's aide arrived on the third day to inspect the human positions. He was a reptilian species with scales that shimmered purple in the light. His distaste for the humans was obvious from the moment he stepped off his shuttle. This is completely wrong, he said, looking at its defensive setup. Your fortifications are not in the designated positions. Your troops are hiding in the terrain like cowards. Where are your battle standards? How will the enemy know where to engage you honorably? Looked at the alien officer with barely concealed contempt. With respect, sir, I don't want the enemy to know where we are. That's the point. That is deception. Scales flushed darker. That is the mark of a dishonorable warrior. That's the mark of a living warrior, replied. Filed a formal complaint with, received the message and ignored it. He had bigger concerns. His sensor crews had detected anomalies in fold space, distortions consistent with ships entering the system, but not on any scheduled council approach routes. They're coming, Minu said quietly, staring at the data. Maybe 3 hours. During rest period, noted. It was the 7th day when all combat was supposed to cease for honoring the dead and treating the wounded. Opened channels to all human forces. Battle stations, this is not a drill. Unknown contacts approaching. All fighters prep for launch. Ground forces, weapons ready. This happens now. The Ravagers emerged from fold space at midnight local time. 12 ships, medium-sized cruisers, dropping into normal space with weapons already hot. They had clearly expected to find sleeping defenders, unprepared stations, and easy targets. Instead, they found humanity. Fighter squadrons launched within 90 seconds. Council doctrine said fighters should form up, announce their presence, and engage in formation combat. Pilots scattered like wasps, using the moon's gravity well to mask their approach vectors. They came at the Ravager ships from 6 different directions, firing missiles and breaking off before the enemy could return effective fire. They're not engaging properly, one of the Ravager ships broadcast in their clicking language, translated by the human computers. They won't hold position for battle. That's the idea, said coldly, lining up another attack run. The Ravagers tried to adapt, breaking formation to chase individual human fighters. It was exactly what wanted. Scattered enemies were vulnerable enemies. Her pilots worked in pairs, one baiting the Ravager ships into pursuit while the other flanked and fired. 3 Ravager ships went down in the first 20 minutes. On the ground, Ravager dropships attempted to land in what Council protocols designated as neutral landing zones, areas where combat forces were allowed to deploy without interference. Mines turned those zones into killing fields. Ravager soldiers poured out of burning ships, only to find themselves facing hidden defensive positions in the Ravagers were used to counsel forces meeting them in open ground, standing in formation. Instead, troops fired from concealment, fell back to secondary positions, and used the terrain like a weapon. The Ravagers advanced into ambush after ambush. "This is not warfare," the Ravager ground commander broadcast. "Show yourselves." "No," said simply, and ordered another volley from positions the Ravagers hadn't even spotted yet. In orbit, watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. The Ravagers were skilled fighters, but they were confused. They kept trying to apply tactics that worked against Council forces, tactics built on the assumption that battles followed rules. When the remaining Ravager ships tried to retreat, fighters pursued them. Council doctrine said you let retreating enemies go with honor. Human doctrine said you made sure they couldn't come back. 2 more ships went down before the survivors jumped back into fold space. Total human casualties, 3 wounded, none dead. Ravager casualties, estimated 40% of their force. The silence on the command deck was absolute as crew stared at the results. Then someone started clapping, and others joined in. "Send a report to," ordered. "Sector 7 held, enemy repelled." The response came 3 hours later. His face appeared on the screen, and he looked like he had swallowed something toxic. Behind him stood several other council officers, all wearing similar expressions of shock and anger. "Commander," said, his voice tight with controlled fury, "I have reviewed your battle reports. You engaged enemy forces during rest period. You used concealment and ambush tactics. Your pilots refused to engage in honorable combat. Your ground forces deployed mines in neutral zones and fired from hidden positions." "Yes," said simply, "and we won." "You violated every protocol of civilized warfare." "The Ravagers violated them first," pointed out. "They attacked during rest period. They came without warning. Should we have just let them destroy us because the calendar said it wasn't time to fight?" His forearms trembled with anger. "You fight without honor." "We fight to survive," said. He leaned forward, his dark eyes hard. "War Master, with respect, your people have been fighting this war for 12 years and losing. We've been here for 2 weeks and just held a position you thought was worthless against a major attack. Maybe it's time to reconsider what honor means in a war where only one side follows the rules. Your methods are barbaric. Our methods are effective." The conversation ended badly. Threatened to remove human forces from the war effort entirely. Suspected it was an empty threat. The Council needed them too much, but he couldn't be sure. That night Minu brought him unexpected news. "Sir, we're receiving private communications from several Council ships, junior officers mostly. They're asking questions about our tactics. They want to understand how we did what we did." Looked out at the stars. Somewhere in the Galactic Council fleet, minds were changing. Young officers were starting to ask dangerous questions about rules and traditions and honor. "Answer them," said. "Honestly, let them know how we fight and why." "Won't like it." "Doesn't have to like it," turned back to his tactical officer. "He just has to accept that his way is getting his people killed. We're offering a different path." "A darker path," Minu said quietly. "Maybe," agreed, "but a path that leads to victory, and in the end that's what matters." The aftermath of Sector 7 changed everything, though not in the way had intended. Word spread through the Council fleet about the human victory. Junior officers whispered about it in mess halls. Tacticians studied the battle recordings in secret. Even as publicly condemned human methods, privately, people were asking questions. Commander sat in his quarters, reviewing intelligence files the Council had provided. What he found disturbed him more than the enemy itself. It was what the Council had never thought to do. Dr. Earth's expert stood beside his desk, reading over his shoulder. She was a middle-aged woman with keen eyes and a mind that saw patterns others missed. "They've never tried to understand the Ravagers psychologically," she said in disbelief. 12 years of war and they've never attempted behavioral analysis, psychological warfare, or strategic deception. "It's not in their doctrine," said. "Look at this, every battle report is pure tactical assessment. Ship positions, weapon effectiveness, casualty counts, but nothing about enemy morale, decision-making patterns, or psychological vulnerabilities. They're treating war like a mathematical equation," observed. "Input forces, calculate optimal positions, execute according to doctrine. They never consider that the enemy might have weaknesses beyond firepower. Pulled up more files. And they've never used intelligence gathering beyond basic reconnaissance. No infiltration, no captured communications, no turned agents. They don't even try to intercept enemy signals because they consider it dishonorable eavesdropping. Meanwhile, the Ravagers are reading them like an open book," said. "Every council formation is predictable. Every defensive schedule is published. They're advertising their own weaknesses in the name of honor." A message arrived from Ambassador. She had been meeting with High Chancellor, the leader of the council. The message was brief. "He wants to talk, privately, just you and me." 2 days later, and stood in a private chamber aboard the council flagship. Was there, along with Fleet Admiral, a massive whale-like creature who commanded the council's naval forces. Both aliens looked exhausted. "Speak freely," said. His translator made his voice sound weary. "No recording devices. Nothing said here will be reported to the War Master." "Then I'll be direct," said. "You're losing this war because you're fighting with rules that your enemy doesn't respect. Every tactical advantage you could have, you've voluntarily given up in the name of honor." Made a sound like deep whale song. "You say this as if honor means nothing." "Honor is fine in peacetime," interjected. "But in war, honor gets your people killed. The Ravagers don't care about your ancient traditions. They care about winning." "What would you have us do?" asked. "Abandon 10,000 years of civilization, become animals like them?" "No," said. "Become something that can survive against them. I'm not saying you need to target civilians or commit atrocities, but you need to be unpredictable. You need to use deception. You need to make the Ravagers afraid." "Fear tactics," said slowly. "Psychological warfare, these concepts are alien to us." "They shouldn't be," Doctor said, entering from a side door where she had been waiting. "I've been analyzing Ravager behavior patterns. They're a hive mind, but not a perfect one. Individual nodes can be confused, frightened, overwhelmed with conflicting information. If we feed them false intelligence, create phantom threats, make them question their own data, we can disrupt their effectiveness." Looked at, some silent communication passed between them. Finally, the High Chancellor spoke. "Show us, but quietly. If the traditional factions learn we're considering this, they'll remove me from power." That was how Operation Phantom Strike began. Gathered his best people. Captain would command the strike force. Engineer Sara, Earth's most innovative ship designer, would provide the technical support. Doctor would handle psychological warfare elements. Lieutenant Minu would coordinate intelligence. "The plan is simple," explained to the assembled group. "We make the Ravagers think a major council fleet is attacking their supply base in the system. We draw their defenses there. While they're distracted, we hit their actual staging ground in the system with a small, fast strike force." "The council will call it treacherous," said. "Which is why we're not telling them," replied. "Has given us authorization to operate independently. Officially, we're conducting training exercises." Sora pulled up holographic displays of modified human ships. "I've been adapting our vessels with systems the Council considers unthinkable. Electronic warfare pods that can spoof sensor readings. Drone ships that look like full cruisers. Mine layers. Stealth coding that doesn't fully cloak us but makes us harder to track." The Ravagers won't expect any of this, Minyu added. They're used to council ships that fight fair and announce their intentions. Doctor displayed her psychological analysis. The Ravager hive mind makes decisions based on pattern recognition. They've fought the Council for 12 years. They know how Council forces operate. When we feed them false patterns, their decision-making becomes compromised. The operation launched a week later. Phase 1 involved broadcasting false distress signals from the system, using language patterns and codes that team had extracted from captured Ravager communications. The signals claimed a major Council fleet was disabled and vulnerable. Simultaneously, Sora's drone ships jumped into the system, projecting sensor signatures that looked like damaged Council cruisers. They hung in space, broadcasting automated distress calls, waiting. The Ravagers took the bait. Watched from the command center as Ravager forces redirected toward 7 full battle groups, abandoning their positions to chase what they thought was an easy victory. They're buying it, Minyu said, tracking the enemy movements. Phase 2 ordered. Captain Strike Force had been waiting in fold space, powered down to minimal signatures. They emerged in the system during what the Council called midnight hour, a time when civilized forces didn't fight. The Ravager staging ground was lightly defended, most of its forces having been drawn away too. Ships didn't announce themselves. They didn't form up for honorable combat. They simply attacked. Missiles lanced through space toward ammunition depots. Fighters strafed repair facilities. Boarding teams, something the Council never used, breached supply ships and planted charges. The entire operation took 47 minutes. By the time the Ravagers had realized they'd been tricked, force was already gone, jumping back to Council space. Behind them, the staging ground was a debris field. Ravager casualties: 3,000 soldiers, 8 ships destroyed, supply lines disrupted for months. Human casualties: 6 wounded, 2 ships with moderate damage. The intelligence came 3 days later. Intercepted Ravager communications showed confusion, anger, and something the Council had never heard before: fear. The Ravagers were arguing among themselves. Some nodes thought it was a Council trick. Others believed a new enemy had entered the war. Their communications showed paranoia, uncertainty, hesitation. "They're scared," Doctor said, reading the translations. "They don't understand what we did. More importantly, they don't know what we'll do next. We've introduced chaos into their pattern-based thinking." When news of the operation leaked, and it did leak, because quietly made sure it did, the Council erupted in controversy. Demanded be court-martialed for violating every principle of honorable warfare. Conservative factions called for humanity's immediate expulsion. But the younger officers had a different reaction. They had seen the results. They had watched a small human force accomplish what years of conventional warfare had failed to achieve. They started asking dangerous questions. Why don't we use deception? Why do we announce our intentions to the enemy? Why do we fight on their schedule instead of ours? Fleet Admiral made a public statement that shocked the Council. "I authorized Operation Phantom Strike," he declared. "I did so because we are losing this war. The humans have shown us that victory requires adaptation, not tradition. If we continue fighting as we have for 10,000 years, we will be extinct within 5. Challenged to a formal debate before the Council. Watched it from the human quarters beside him. "This will determine everything," said quietly. "If wins, they might actually listen to us. If wins, we'll probably be sent home." On the screen, spoke with passion about honor, tradition, and the sanctity of civilized warfare. He painted humanity as bringing darkness to a galaxy that had maintained peace through mutual respect. Then spoke, his words were simple. "My colleague speaks of honor and tradition, I speak of survival. We have lost 200 colonies to the Ravagers, 30 billion lives. Our fleets shrink while theirs grow. Honor is meaningless to the dead. If we must become something new to survive, then that is what we must do. The vote was close, but won. By a slim margin, the Council agreed to allow humanity to train select alien units in unconventional warfare tactics. Stormed out of the chamber. As he passed the human quarters, he stopped and looked directly at through the viewport. His amber eyes burned with contempt. "You have corrupted everything we stand for," the War Master said. "No," replied quietly, "we're trying to save it." The training facility was built on a remote moon, far from the main Council fleets. High Chancellor had insisted on secrecy. The conservative faction still commanded significant power, and if they knew the full extent of what humans were teaching, they would find ways to shut it down. Commander stood in the main briefing room, looking at the assembled alien officers. 50 of them, handpicked by Fleet Admiral from the younger generation. They represented 15 different species, each with their own biology, culture, and understanding of warfare. What they all shared was a willingness to question 10,000 years of tradition. "Everything you know about war is wrong," said. His translator repeated the words in multiple languages simultaneously. "Not because your ancestors were stupid, not because your traditions were meaningless, but because the galaxy changed and you didn't change with it." One of the aliens, a bird-like creature named, raised a wing. "Commander, we understand that adaptability is important, but how do we maintain our identity while adopting these human methods?" It was Captain who answered. She stood beside, wearing her flight suit every inch the warrior. "Identity isn't about how you fight, it's about why you fight. You can change your tactics and still be who you are, but if you die with honor intact, you're still dead." Over the next months, the training program grew. Commander, Earth's special operations expert, taught the first lesson, asymmetric warfare. He was a lean man with scars on his hands and a quiet intensity that made even the largest aliens pay attention. "In asymmetric warfare, you don't match strength with strength," explained. "You find the enemy's weakness and exploit it relentlessly. If they're strong in space, you hit their ground forces. If they're organized, you create chaos. If they rely on patterns, you become unpredictable." The alien students struggled with the concept. A massive reptilian officer named raised a question. "But if we strike at weakness instead of engaging strength, how do we prove our superiority?" "You don't," said bluntly. "You win, that's the proof." Sergeant handled ground combat training. She took the alien troops into the moon's harsh terrain and taught them things that made many uncomfortable. How to hide, how to ambush, how to make the enemy afraid to advance because every shadow might hold death. "I feel like a coward," one alien soldier said after a particularly brutal training exercise. Looked at him hard. "Would you rather feel like a coward or be an honorable corpse? Because those are your choices when the enemy doesn't play by your rules." Doctor taught psychological warfare and intelligence gathering. This was perhaps the hardest lesson for the aliens to absorb. The concept of deceiving an enemy, of manipulating their perceptions and decisions, went against every instinct they had developed over. "Information is a weapon," explained, displaying intercepted communications on the screen. "When you know what the enemy plans, you can counter it. When you control what they know, you control their decisions. Warfare isn't just about ships and soldiers. It's about understanding the mind of your opponent." Pilot, Captain Second in Command, trained the alien fighter pilots. She was young, brilliant, and terrifyingly good at what she did. The first lesson she taught them was simple: forget everything you know about dogfighting. "Council fighters engage in formation," she said, displaying tactical videos. "You approach the enemy, declare your intent to fight, and then engage in what amounts to an aerial duel. It's beautiful, it's traditional, it gets you killed." She showed them human fighter tactics, swarm attacks, hit-and-run strikes, using asteroids and debris for cover, attacking from the sun, feinting retreats to lure enemies into ambushes, Nothing was forbidden if it kept you alive and killed the enemy. One alien pilot, watching a simulation where human fighters pretended to retreat only to turn and destroy pursuing enemies, made a sound of distress. "This is deception. This is dishonorable." "This is effective," replied. "Do you want to fly with honor or do you want to fly home?" Not all the alien students accepted the training. About 15% dropped out, unwilling to compromise their principles. Didn't try to stop them. "Some people can't adapt," he told. "That's not weakness. That's just who they are." But the ones who stayed became something new. Watched as alien officers who had spent their entire lives following rigid doctrine began to think creatively. They started proposing their own unconventional tactics, combining human methods with their unique abilities and technologies. The bird-like officer developed a specialty in reconnaissance and intelligence. Her species could see in multiple spectrums, making them perfect for gathering information undetected. She created protocols for espionage that her ancestors would have called shameful, but that could save thousands of lives. The massive reptilian became an expert in ambush warfare. His species was incredibly strong but slow, making them poor at traditional combat maneuvers. But in defensive positions, using terrain and surprise, they were nearly unstoppable. The real test came 5 months into the training program. A Ravager battle group attacked a Council mining colony in the system. It was a standard Ravager tactic: hit a soft target, destroy resources, retreat before reinforcements arrived. Except this time, the mining colony was defended by graduates of the human training program. Commander watched the battle from the command center, holding his breath. Stood beside him, equally tense. This would prove whether everything they had taught could work in real combat. The Ravagers approached according to their established pattern: overwhelming force, expect minimal resistance, quick destruction, rapid withdrawal. Instead, they found a trap. The defenseless mining facilities were actually hardened positions. The civilian ships fleeing the system were actually carrying special operations teams who boarded and sabotaged Ravager vessels. The panicked, distress calls were bait to draw more enemy ships into engagement range. Alien officers who had been trained by humans implemented tactics that would have been unthinkable months ago. They used deception. They attacked from ambush. They exploited Ravager expectations about how Council forces would fight. The Ravagers lost 4 ships before they understood what was happening. By the time they retreated, they had suffered 70% casualties. The news spread through the Council fleet like wildfire. Tried to suppress it, but he couldn't stop officers from talking. The humans had created something that worked. Tradition and honor hadn't saved that colony. Ruthless, effective tactics had. More officers applied for the training program. The facility expanded, quietly approved additional funding, even as conservative factions protested. Then came the message that changed the war. The Ravagers requested negotiations. For the first time in 12 years, they wanted to talk. "It's a trap," insisted at the emergency council meeting. "The Ravagers don't negotiate. They never have. This is deception, the very tactic humans have infected us with." But Fleet Admiral disagreed. "They're afraid. For the first time, they're facing enemies they can't predict. They don't know what we'll do next. That fear is leverage." Ambassador was chosen to lead the diplomatic mission, along with several Council diplomats. Commander would provide military security. As they prepared to depart, received a private message from Lieutenant Minu. "Sir, our intelligence detected something. There's a massive Ravager fleet hidden near the negotiation coordinates. If this is a peace meeting, why do they need that many warships nearby?" Looked at the data. A cold feeling settled in his stomach. He showed it too. "They're going to attack," she said quietly. "The peace talks are bait." "Yes," agreed. "The question is, do we tell the Council?" Thought for a long moment. "Not yet. If we do, they'll either cancel the meeting or send a massive fleet. Either way, the Ravagers will know we detected them. They'll adapt their strategy. So we walk into the trap, said. No, replied with a thin smile. We spring it on our terms. Looked at her and understood. The Ravagers thought they had learned to use deception like humans. They thought they could beat humanity at its own game. They were about to learn the difference between copying tactics and understanding strategy. Notify, said. Tell him we need to move our own forces into position, quietly, very quietly. As the diplomatic ship prepared for departure, stood on the bridge, thinking about all the lessons humanity had taught the Council. Deception, adaptation, ruthless effectiveness. Now it was time for the final lesson. Never assume you're the one in the room, especially when dealing with a species that had been perfecting the art of war for thousands of years, before the Galactic Council even existed. The diplomatic vessel approached the neutral coordinates with all the ceremony the Galactic Council could muster. Flags flew. Formal broadcasts announced their peaceful intentions. Ambassador stood in her finest diplomatic robes, every inch the representative of a civilization seeking peace. Hidden in a cargo hold, wearing full combat gear, Commander watched tactical displays with Lieutenant Minu. Around them, 50 elite soldiers waited in silence. None of this was on any official manifest. The Ravager delegation is arriving, Minu whispered, watching sensor data scroll across his screen. 12 diplomatic ships just as they promised, and approximately 3 hours away at fold speed. There it is, 47 warships holding position. Waiting for the signal, said. They'll wait until both diplomatic teams are together, vulnerable. Then they'll jump in and destroy everyone. It's actually a smart plan, Minu admitted. Kill all the Council leadership in one strike. Blame it on humans using dishonorable tactics. Turn the Council against us while eliminating their command structure. It would be smart, agreed, if we hadn't seen it coming 3 weeks ago. The diplomatic meeting began in the main conference chamber. Ravager representatives, tall, chitinous creatures with multiple eyes, sat across from Council diplomats. Ambassador led the human delegation, speaking words of peace and cooperation while her eyes remained cold and calculating. The Ravager lead negotiator, identified only as Node 73, spoke in clicking sounds that the translators rendered as monotone common speech. We come seeking end to conflict. Both sides have suffered. Perhaps compromise is possible. Who had insisted on attending despite his opposition to negotiations, sat rigid with suspicion. For once, appreciated the War Master's paranoid nature. Didn't trust this any more than the humans did. 3 levels below, in the engine room, Sergeant and her team were already in position. They had been smuggled aboard in equipment crates. Now they waited beside critical systems, ready to move. 2 hours into the negotiations, Minu's quiet voice came through his hidden earpiece. Ravager fleet is moving, entering fold space. They'll arrive in 20 minutes. Sent a single coded signal too. In the conference room, she paused mid-sentence, touching her ear as if receiving an important message. Then she looked directly at Node 73. I'm curious, said calmly. Why would you come to peace negotiations with 47 warships hidden nearby? The chamber erupted. Council diplomats gasped, stood, reaching for a weapon he wasn't carrying. The Ravager delegates went utterly still, their alien faces unreadable. You're mistaken, Node 73 said. We came in peace. No, replied. You came to kill us all and blame humanity for it. You learned deception from watching us, but you forgot something important. What is that? The Ravager asked. We knew you were coming. The Ravager delegates moved with shocking speed, drawing weapons that had been hidden in their bodies. But human soldiers were faster, having been positioned throughout the chamber in disguise. The Ravagers went down in seconds, stunned but not killed. On the tactical display hidden in wrist unit, the Ravager fleet emerged from fold space right where predicted, and waiting for them were not helpless diplomatic vessels. Fleet Admiral had positioned 3 full battle groups in the area weeks ago, hidden behind moon-sized asteroids, powered down to minimal signatures. Human-trained council officers commanded them now, officers who understood that sometimes the best defense was a carefully prepared ambush. The Ravager fleet found itself suddenly surrounded by overwhelming force that shouldn't have been there. Their planned surprise attack became a disaster. But Commander wasn't satisfied with just winning the battle. He wanted to win the war. Phase 2, he ordered through encrypted channels. Captain Strike Force, which had been waiting in fold space for this exact moment, emerged not at the battle site but at 3 different Ravager command centers. They had learned the locations from careful intelligence work over months, the kind of spying and reconnaissance that the Council had never bothered with before. Pilot led her squadron in the most daring part of the plan. While Ravager forces were distracted by the battle at the negotiation site, she and her pilots broke through minimal defenses at the primary Ravager coordination node. Their target wasn't to destroy, it was to capture. The Ravager hive mind had nodes, connection points where individual consciousness linked to the greater whole. Take those nodes, and you could paralyze entire sections of the enemy force. It was Doctor who had identified this weakness, spending months analyzing captured communications and Ravager biology. Target acquired, reported, her voice steady despite the danger, deploying boarding teams. Sergeant led the boarding action personally. Her team stormed through the Ravager command vessel with brutal efficiency. They used stun weapons rather than lethal force, another human innovation that confused the Ravagers. The Council killed enemies or let them surrender honorably. Humans captured them and extracted intelligence. Within an hour they had secured 3 Ravager command nodes, living ones, terrified ones. The effect on the Ravager fleet was immediate and catastrophic. With their command structure compromised, individual ships began making decisions independently. The hive mind fractured into confused, frightened fragments. "Cease fire," Fleet Admiral ordered. His massive form loomed on communication screens across all Council ships. "Ravager forces, you will stand down immediately. We hold your command nodes. We can kill them or we can negotiate. Choose now." The Ravagers had never faced this situation before. No one had ever captured their leadership alive. No one had ever turned their own strength, their interconnected consciousness, into a vulnerability. After a long, tense silence, the Ravager fleet powered down their weapons. The formal surrender came 3 days later. The Ravagers agreed to withdraw from all contested territory, pay reparations, and establish neutral zones. In return, the Council would return the captured command nodes unharmed. It was the first time in galactic history that the Ravagers had ever truly surrendered. In the aftermath, stood in the Council chamber facing the assembly. His amber eyes had lost some of their fire. "I opposed human methods," he said, his voice carrying across the vast hall. "I called them dishonorable, barbaric, shameful. I was wrong." The chamber went silent. "I was wrong," continued, "because I confused honor with effectiveness. I confused tradition with wisdom. For 10,000 years, we fought wars according to rules that both sides accepted. We won because everyone played the same game. Then came an enemy that refused to play, and we began to lose." He turned to look at Commander, who stood with Ambassador in the human delegation area. "Humans taught us something terrible and necessary. They taught us that war is not a game. It is not about honor or tradition. It is about survival, about adapting faster than your enemy, about doing whatever is necessary to protect your people." The Council members shifted uncomfortably. Some looked angry, others thoughtful. "The question before us now," said, "is what kind of civilization we want to be. Do we return to our old ways, comfortable in our traditions? Or do we embrace this new, darker path that ensures our survival? High Chancellor stood. Perhaps the question is wrong. Perhaps we don't have to choose between honor and effectiveness. The humans have shown us brutal tactics, yes, but they also showed us restraint. They captured enemies rather than killing them. They used deception but not atrocity. They fought to win, but they didn't become monsters to do it. Ambassador stepped forward. "If I may speak," she said, and nodded permission. "Humanity didn't survive because we're more brutal than other species. We survived because Earth gave us no choice but to adapt. We had hundreds of nations, thousands of cultures, all competing and fighting. We learned every way to fight because we had to. Every trick, every tactic, every strategy." She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled species. "But we also learned when to stop, when to show mercy, when to build instead of destroy. The lesson isn't that honor is worthless. The lesson is that honor without effectiveness is suicide, and effectiveness without honor is atrocity. You need both." Fleet Admiral made his deep whale song sound. "The young commander speaks wisdom. We will restructure our military doctrine based on human principles, not to abandon who we are, but to ensure we survive to remain who we are." The vote was nearly unanimous. The Galactic Council would adopt human military training across all forces. Commander would be promoted to Supreme Tactical Advisor. Human methods would be taught, but always with the underlying principle: adapt to survive, but never lose your soul in the process. Later, Commander and Captain stood together at a viewport, watching the memorial service for fallen soldiers. Despite all their tactical brilliance, people had still died. Human and alien both. "We changed them," said quietly. "Change the galaxy. Is it better?" Was silent for a long moment. "I don't know. We taught them how to win, but winning isn't the same as peace." "Do you regret it?" "No," said. "The Ravagers would have destroyed them. Better a galaxy that knows how to fight than a galaxy that's extinct. But I wonder what comes next. We opened a door that can't be closed." Nodded. "Other species will learn these methods. Some will use them wisely, others won't." "That's not our responsibility," said, but he didn't sound convinced. A message arrived on personal comm. It was from Lieutenant Minu. "Sir, intelligence has detected unusual activity in the Outer Rim. New species, aggressive expansion, signs of advanced military doctrine. They've been watching us, watching what we did." Closed his eyes. Of course. The galaxy had seen humanity teach the Council how to wage total war. Now others were learning, adapting, taking those lessons in directions humans never intended. "We thought we were teaching them survival," said, reading the message over his shoulder. "Maybe we were teaching them something else." "Maybe," agreed. "Or maybe this is just how civilizations grow, through conflict and adaptation, through learning hard lessons and becoming stronger." "Or more dangerous," pointed out. "Sometimes those are the same thing." They stood in silence, watching the memorial lights flicker in the darkness of space. Humanity had revealed its true power to the galaxy, not raw strength, not advanced technology, but the terrible, beautiful ability to adapt without mercy, to survive without surrender, to win without honor limiting effectiveness. The galaxy would never be the same. Whether that was evolution or corruption, salvation or damnation, remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the Galactic Council had learned what it meant to fight like humanity, and that knowledge, once gained, could never be forgotten. Somewhere in the dark between stars, new empires were rising, learning the lessons humans had taught. The age of honorable warfare was over. The age of survival had begun. And humanity, for better or worse, had shown them all the way.